speak about addiction. Emma, what does addiction mean to you and how did it impact your life?
Well, for me, it's always been part of my life. I'm in recovery myself from alcohol. My husband's in recovery, and my mum was a drinker as well, although she would never admit to being an alcoholic, but it was very obvious that she was. So, as well as being the adult child of an addict, my father might have been a glue sniffer. We're not 100% sure. He passed when I was 3. So, yeah, I've had it from all angles.
And how did you deal with that growing up when you mentioned you had your parents who were suffering from addiction?
So, growing up, I was brought up in pubs. So, drinking was just the norm for us. I would see my mum drinking every night as she worked behind the bar, but it wasn't so obvious. You wouldn't see the empty bottles or a lot of the sneaky behavior that you get with addiction because it was just everybody sat around having a drink. But we'd always have lock ins, and yeah, it was just the norm. People say to me, "You must have remembered when you had your first drink." And I could not tell you. It was just always in the home. I remember my little brother falling off the chair having Christmas dinner at the age of 3 after having a sip of champagne, which we found hilarious. But luckily, well, not luckily, but he's grown up and he doesn't really like alcohol. Whereas I went the other way and I used it as a coping mechanism. And I realise now that that's why my mum was using alcohol, but she never wanted to address why she was drinking. The trauma that she had experienced in her life was too much for her to deal with. So, whereas I wanted to get to the root of the problem, my mum was just happy to mask it all through her life.
I know for me, I've known a few people that had addiction, and what some people I think miss is that addiction comes in so many forms, right? Like I think the common one is drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
But people don't understand you could be addicted to women, you could be addicted to men, you could be addicted to porn, you could be addicted to sex, you could be addicted to gambling, you could be addicted to video games, right? And I think what happens sometimes is that we look at life similar to maybe how you looked at it or you're alluding to, Emma, is that, well, if it isn't drugs or alcohol, I'm good. It doesn't matter if I'm doing
Yeah.
anything else, right? I had a friend, he used to watch pornography hours out of the day. It was to the point where while he was working, he was watching it. So he was an addiction. He was an addict to it. He was addicted.
Yeah.
It took over his life. And the way he used to speak about women began to get skewed. And you know it's bad when the people on the outside can notice it because usually it's like a gradual thing, right? It's like if it's alcohol, it's a glass of wine every couple of days, a glass of wine every day, a bottle of wine, 2 bottles of wine, right? So for him, it was all encompassing and it consumed him. And one of the downsides that I began to realize at that time was he became very destructive towards women because remember what he's watching, the women are very, or the participants are very willing, right? It doesn't matter what is being offered or what being asked, they're very willing because that's what they're getting paid to do. It's entertainment. But I think some people forget that the addiction begins to rewire your brain and you see things differently. When we're going through what you're going through and some of the people that you're working with, do they do you see that happening in them or do they understand how powerful the addiction is in their life?
Yeah, well, I think you bring up some really good points there because addiction is basically anything in our lives which affects, I don't like the word normal, but say the normal running of our lives. So it interferes with our life. As you said, like with porn, it could be you watch it for half an hour, then it goes to an hour. and it's starting to interfere with your life because you do that rather than eat, rather than socialize. And it tends to be other people that will notice it before you. They might not know it's an addiction, but they will notice a change in behavior. So they'll notice that you're not going out more, becoming more secluded. As you said, a change of behavior of towards women or towards their partner. And there's a lot of sneaky behavior because people don't want other people to know what they're doing. And it doesn't always have to, like you said, be the obvious ones like alcohol, drugs. It could be shopping. So if you keep shopping, then you're getting into financial difficulties. And I knew a lady who went into rehab for alcohol addiction. And when she left, she began going to the gym. But she was going to the gym so much. After 2 months, she looked worse than when she did when she went into rehab because that was her new coping mechanism. And she couldn't deal with what was going on in her life. So she just went to the gym. Now we all have a coping mechanism. It's just how much are we doing it and is it impacting on our lives? So really, really good points there. Really good points.
Do you think it's sometimes scary for people to come to terms with their life being controlled by the addiction?
Yeah, there's a number of things where people, the first is the reality that they are addicted to something. That there's a lot of denial there because that's the thing that's keeping them safe, whether they realize it at the time or not. So the reality of having to face it, it's not only, say, with alcohol, once you give up alcohol, all your feelings come back, you've got to start addressing what it was in the first place. So they say when you come out of rehab or once you've given up that substance or behavior is when the real work starts, and it's addressing what's going on for yourself. So I think especially for me, I didn't know originally what was affecting me or what I was hiding from. I knew I had an abusive childhood. I knew I'd suffered my father passing, but I didn't feel like a victim. So I could not, it wouldn't register with me what was going on. So I saw so many different therapists. There's so many different types of therapy and talking. And I eventually spoke to somebody about codependency. And that's when a light bulb went off for me. And I was like, right, okay. Now I know why I'm so quiet. Now I know why I don't speak out. And it sort of gave me the green light to be who I was and embrace the quietness and turn them into a positive and not a negative. And other things like abandonment. I never thought abandonment was part of my life. But when I look back, my father died, so that was abandonment. I went to live with my great grandparents to live in a safe household, and that was abandonment. I went to boarding school where I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world because I could swim every night. I was with my friends. It was great. But that was abandonment again. So these things that I'd never thought of, I was having to deal with then. And it was a big, big shock.
That is shocking because you realize how much of a how not how much, but you realize how powerful how powerless you truly are, right?
Absolutely.
Right? Like
Yeah.
if I look at it, right, and let's say if I was addicted to money, right? Like the pursuit, I want a house, I want a car. You get the house, you get the car. I want a bigger house, I want a better car, faster car. At some point, you would hope that you'd be like, you know what? I'm content, right? And as of today, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Right? But the addiction doesn't ever reach that point. Like you made about the gym. I can't deal with what I'm going through at the gym. Let's say I was bullied. I was called ugly. I was made fun of because I was skinny. I go to the gym. I get stronger. I get bigger. And in a lot of ways, when your body looks healthier, you feel more attractive because more people are giving you that type of energy. But if it's an addiction, it doesn't ever end because there isn't anything that is going to say, "Hey, you've reached it. You're good now." Right? Like how much of it is more so the mental aspect, coming to terms with, okay, it's more than X, versus if I just keep doing this, eventually I'll reach the goal, even though we all know that the goal never comes.
Absolutely. That's a really good example as well, because it doesn't matter how big you get, how strong you feel. If somebody says that one thing to you that you remember from being bullied, that's you're going to spiral again, or there'll be a trigger, and bullying could be that trigger. So it doesn't, you could be Superman. It doesn't matter. You could be the Hulk. If you're hearing that and believing those things that you were said to you when you were younger, you're not going to feel good about yourself and your self-esteem is going to go down. And that's when you need your coping mechanism. So you can work out and work out and work out. It's not going to solve that mental process. And we store trauma when we've had a traumatic event like that. We store it in the body, so we are reliving it every day. So it is about coming to terms and finding out about that bullying. And it might not be, you might be remember being bullied in the playground, but when you look back, you might even trace it back before then. It might be something before that was the initial trigger. I spoke to a woman once, and it was, I think it was abandonment that she was trying to work on. And she had been divorced and these things, but we did some work and we traced it all the way back to when she was about 10 or 11. And her like boyfriend at the time, play boyfriend, was up a tree and said, I don't want to go out with you anymore, leave me alone. And we tracked it all the way back to being like 10 years old and that play. So with her trying to say, I'm over my ex-husband, it was a good thing. I needed a fresh start. All the positive things we worked on, her being 10 years old and the boy in the tree. And that's when she was able to come to terms with the abandonment issues that she was having. So it's not always what we think it is.
Is that common that a lot of, let's say, the mental health issues that develop into addiction can be traced back to, let's say, an adverse childhood experience that maybe at the time was really traumatic to them, but because they maybe locked it away in a closet somewhere or, tucked it underneath their bed, they don't recall how traumatic it actually was.
Yeah, definitely. And the brain can shut it off and hide it to protect us. And what we really need to do is address that, because for many years, when I was told to look at my trauma, as I previously said, I didn't think I was in trauma because was happy with my life. And just for the record as well, I being in recovery now, I wouldn't change my addiction for the world because it's taught me so much and given me so many tools to live a better life that I wouldn't change any of that at all. So, yeah, sorry, getting back to your point, looking at adverse childhood experiences is a massive thing, ACEs. You'll find that many people in addiction have a high ACEs score. And I did a talk on it to do, it doesn't matter who you are, but if a parent had been incarcerated or you felt alone, ever went to school feeling hungry, there's 10 questions to ACEs, and I think I was 9 out of 10. So I had a high ACEs score. And it's something people should really research and look at because I'm trying to explain it the best I can. It is something that if you don't research and look into, you are passing it on to your children and for generations.
When I came across ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, I was surprised how many people experience how many people would score in multiple areas on it, as well as how it ties in into so many behaviors that at least these days online, at least on especially social media, we kind of tolerate, right? Even though we think it's detrimental and it's not the best thing to do, we kind of tolerate. So, for example, it would impact men and women differently. So, for example, men will be impacted if they have an adverse childhood experience. They may be more prone to run the streets, join gangs. Like they would express it maybe in those ways, petty theft, shoplifting, things like that, right? And then you have women who they maybe become more promiscuous, sexually active at a very early age, right? Um, Compromise themselves in sexual ways. But now, when you fast forward, even though these behaviors, these two examples, are can be detrimental to the individual, right? From a mental fitness standpoint, some people celebrate it. Some people kind of tolerate those behaviors. That that's okay. You can give it away to whoever you want. Well, that's okay. You're young and we get it. You're stealing stuff like that. But they're saying these things to people who aren't 12, 13, and 14. These are people who are 25, 28, 30. So so when it comes to ACEs, can you maybe explain to our audience how it truly does impact and some of the dangers of maybe dismissing and minimizing those experiences?
Yeah, well, I was talking to somebody the other day and we were saying, she said to me, how would you speak to a teenager whose parents are in addiction? And I said, they know, even if you think you're hiding it, they know that something's not right. So whether it's your behavior, the energy you're giving off, they know that something's not right. And you're passing behavior straight away from doing that. So just be open and honest. They might not be able to work out exactly what's going on, but be open and honest from the beginning. Because as you said, we get into these behaviors, like you said, gangs, because for protection, you think you're protecting yourself and or your family. Women being promiscuous could be because they feel that's how they get their love and being wanted. And you'll see that in relationships, males and females. They'll go through multiple relationships and they won't stick because that's what they've been taught growing up. That they'll get some love from their parents and then they'll be drinking or using or doing whatever. And then they need to find their love from other people. So whether that's in friends, whether that's in other family members, the behaviors that you're doing in front of your children, they will pick up and learn from that. And it sounds so obvious, but when you think that you're hiding it and the children don't know, they're well aware. They can see the manipulation, they can see the sneaky behavior, and they will learn that and learn that very, very well.
What do you think what do you think are some of the ways the children who are seeing this behavior, and as you mentioned earlier on, everyone on the outside can see it many times before the person who is actually experiencing can. How do you think that impacts the children who are witnessing this as they're growing up?
I think there's a lot of confusion and it becomes normality. So coming home late at night, disappearing in the middle of the night, whether it's just going into the basement or locking yourself in the bedroom because you're using that's normal behavior. So they'll be displaying that behavior to their friends. And if you're not being open and honest and you think that everything's being contained within the house, like these little secrets, they're not. They're talking to their friends about it. So they are going to know. And this is what they're just going to pass on to their children.
And I think that's the danger, right? And I think that's a danger that probably gets ignored. Like, imagine you're struggling with something, your children see it, you haven't come to terms with it yet, maybe because you're still in denial, maybe because, and I've seen this happen, maybe because your friends have insulated you in a way, and they're like, it's not that bad when it really is that bad, right? I've heard stories where some people have destructive behaviors and their friends kind of encourage it because they turn a blind eye. But now your children are seeing this. They're going out either telling other people about the behavior, or worse yet, they're mimicking the behavior. And children don't have the experiences or the resources to protect themselves the way that adults do. So if an adult is going through an addiction, going through struggles with mental health, mental fitness, and they can't cope, imagine the child, the very young adult who doesn't have the same type of wherewithal that the adult has.
Exactly. So it's not about just coming out and saying, I'm an addict. This is what I do. It's bad for you. Don't do it. That won't work. But children are sponges and they're much more capable than we give them credit for. We can teach them tools of how to look after themselves, giving them activities to do, allowing them to spend time with their friends, allowing them to go to clubs and go after their dreams. If it's sports, if it's studying, if it's whatever they want to do, we can help them explore who they want to be. And an example of how people can change is from their parents. I used to love balloons, and I always remember my mum growing up. And because we lived in the pubs, we would blow up hundreds of balloons ready for New Year's. New Year's would come, they'd all come. Like my hours of blowing up balloons was like wasted in 2 minutes. But my mum would blow up a balloon and she'd be like, oh, 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 waiting for it to pop. And I do that now. And I've learnt that behavior from my mum to be fearful of a balloon. And where's that come? Because when we're born, we're not scared of balloons. We're not scared of bottles of alcohol. We're not scared of certain behavior. We're not used to these evil things in the world. But if we're being told that this is evil and that's evil, don't touch this, don't touch that, we're going to grow up wanting to experiment and find out more about it and learn. So it can be really dangerous. I hope that made sense. It made
It
sense in
does.
my head.
Yeah, yeah. It's all about finding the balance,
Yeah.
right? Right. And identifying what is triggering you. What are maybe some of the ways then we can identify those triggers so it doesn't consume us and lead to addiction?
Talking is the one massive thing because addiction is all about resentments, secrets. They are some of the biggest things. And relapses, 9 times out of 10, you'll relapse on a resentment or a secret. Another big one is pain, but pain management's something different. But the more we talk and offload, the lighter we feel. It doesn't have to be, I wouldn't advise with somebody close to you. You want somebody impartial where you can just let it all out. Because we'll have things from childhood, we'll have things from adulthood that we don't understand. And sometimes just saying it out loud, we can make sense of it or we can start tracing it. But talking to a trusted person and having a good community around you is essential. So the more we lock ourselves away, the more we're burying the trauma, which is not going to do us any good at all. It's going to bring our body's pain, our mind's pain, and we'll become more and more secluded. So, talk.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because we touched on it briefly earlier when it comes to those around us. And maybe sometimes we are going through what we're going through because of our peer group, because of our friends, because of our family, because maybe they're not the right ones for us, but for us, whatever reason, we're keeping them around. And I remember a time in my life, let's say my early 20s, where I was trying to figure life out. I was an adult, but I was very unsure of my place in the world. And when I say my place in the world, because I know some people maybe are confused, is that I think every single person that is growing up in the world wants to belong somewhere in it, right? From a child to an adolescent to an adult until you're in the twilight of your life. I was trying to figure that out. But the people around me were stunting my growth because they didn't care to figure it out because even though we're all adults, they were still in the childlike mind, running around doing not taking responsibility or accountability for their actions. And one thing that I realized was I was in a way being drawn to toxic people, maybe addicted to toxic people,
Yeah.
just because it was easier to be around them because the standards were lower. And because the standards were lower, you're more prone to do things that you wouldn't necessarily do because you're going to compromise yourself. Do you see that happening where some people compromise themselves, fall into issues, fall into addiction because of the people they keep around them and they're trying to fit in, even though they know what they're doing is wrong?
Yeah. And I think we're naturally social beings, even if my husband says all the time, I don't like people, but he is a social being. Sometimes he just has those days when he doesn't want to talk to anyone, and so do I. We need our space, but we are social beings, so we all want to belong. And if we can't find our natural group, we will gravitate to the nearest group that will have us, no matter the impact on ourselves. So if it is, say, a gang, or if you're a girl and it's a male group, or vice versa, if we're accepted, then we feel wanted, which is exactly what the human condition is. We want to be wanted and loved. So we will navigate towards that. And once we've done that, it can be so hard to change our behaviors because we've fitted in. We've been accepted as we are. We don't have to change. And then if we think about joining a different group or changing our behaviors, we're going to be shunned by the group that loved us. And that can be difficult to deal with, even if we know it's wrong and there is somewhere else for us. As much as we hate to admit it, we don't like to be disliked. And if it can look like we're turning our back on the people that loved us, even when we know deep down it's not for us. So it is so natural. It really is.
And then they're caught in the middle because there's very little effort to be a part of this group, which isn't benefiting them. But then when you look across the aisle and you see these healthy relationships, healthy marriages, healthy men, healthy women, and they've put in the effort. I wonder, and maybe you know the answer to this, I wonder how many people don't even try because they know that the effort is so much more than they could probably give at that point in their life.
And it's responsibility as well. It could be the first time, especially in I don't want to say broken homes, but homes that have been damaged in some way. It could be about taking responsibility, especially for ourselves. And from our childhood, we might not know how to take responsibility or look after ourselves. And we see it on social media and the telly and everything all the time, the perfect families, and they look great and they've got this amazing job. And it's like, this is what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to have children. We're supposed to have great jobs. And that's not reality. Not everybody is responsible. So it's a big learning curve. If you get married, it's and you don't know about yourself, how can you teach your partner about you when you're not sure about yourself in the first place? And many people struggle with who they are and what they like to do. So it really is looking at yourself, spending time with yourself is a big, big part of all that. And if you've been brought up somewhere where you don't feel safe, that can be difficult to discover who you are because you're just trapped in that trauma bubble, protecting yourself and not being yourself.
Is the responsibility and accountability piece difficult for people to handle?
I think it's something that should be taken slowly. And because I talk to people as well when they come out of rehab or stop drinking, it's like straight away they should start work. They should be doing this, they should be doing that. Why should they be doing that? You know, they've been through this traumatic event with addiction, and it just doesn't, life doesn't suddenly become roses because they've put down the substance or stopped the behavior. You've still got bills, you've still got relationships, you've still got the car that doesn't start, you've still got the weather, you know, life hasn't stopped and it doesn't just restart all wonderful. So get used to what's going to start simple. It can be so nerve-wracking just walking down to the local shop. If that's somewhere where you always used to buy your alcohol, that can be such a nervous thing for people to do. Um, if you've just got divorced and you're starting to go out and socialize, and everybody is like, well, where's your partner? It's whatever you've come from, start small because everything's going to be so overwhelming that you just can't cope. So you'll just go back to the old behavior. It's so much easier.
It's like that advice where when you're going through something, all you have to do is just keep your chin up, right?
Yeah,
Just point your chin to
that's
the
it.
sky and everything will magically,
Right.
yeah, you'll be all
Yeah,
right. And it's like, well, if it was that easy, every time we go to the grocery store, everyone would just be
yeah,
right, you know, with their nose and their chin in the air. But it's a lot more because just accepting, and this is I think difficult for a lot of people, just accepting you're not perfect, right? Like for a lot of people, that is difficult enough because some people have been told that they're God's gift to us, right? Like some
yeah,
people have been told you're perfect, you're this, you're this, you're this. Just understanding that you're not perfect. And then the second thing is just accepting that you're not always going to get what you want can
yeah,
be difficult for some people. I remember I worked with someone and he had a difficulty understanding that because he believed in his mind, and maybe this came from his parents or somewhere else, who knows? But he believed that he was entitled to your time, when he wanted it, and how he wanted it. So, for example, he would say, okay, I'm going to call Emma right now. And if you don't pick up, he'll call again and again and again, right? And let's say he called you 10, 50 times, 10 to 15 times during that day, and you didn't pick up because you're busy with your family, your husband, whomever. He'll send you a text message. Are you going to answer your phone? So
Yeah.
he was conditioned to believe that whenever he needs someone's attention, he's supposed to get it right then and there. And then when people started to let him know that that is impossible, he moved away from interacting with people to interacting with video games. And then he became addicted to video games, right? Like if he had to work and he could work extra hours and get extra money, which he always said that he needed, but he wanted to play that one video game because for some reason it couldn't wait until later on in the day, he wouldn't work. He would miss work. He would miss meeting with
Safe.
friends. It's safe, right? And one thing I noticed towards the end of my friendship with him is that he began to speak to people face to face, like it was in a video game. So if you were to tell him something he didn't like, like online, you can just block and delete that person, right? There's no conflict resolution online in video games, right? So in person now, that's what he did. Like if there's something that you know he didn't like about you or you didn't like, he would leave. An example of this is he came to visit a couple of us because he lives in a different part of the country. And he was telling people that he's going to stay with them. He didn't ask, he told them. So people started to push back, like, no, I don't have the space because of family, kids, whatever the case is. So when he came here and he actually had to get a hotel, which that's how people normally travel,
Yeah.
he's like, okay, I can't spend the weekend more. And he went home. So the whole week of vacation, he literally rage quit. He literally said, okay, bye bye. I'm going back. And we're all like, okay. Right. So I bring this up because the addiction to whatever you're addicted to impacts your life in so many ways that maybe you don't factor in. And when you deal with the people who had the addiction to alcohol, for example, did you observe their interaction with people change in a way that became more destructive, not only to them, but the people around them, resulting in the people keeping a distance from them?
Yeah, I think it's not it can be the loved ones as well of people in addiction. But one of the biggest things you'll find is when you're in addiction, you'll lose your friends because of your behaviors. But then you'll make new friends who are probably destructive. So then when you get sober or clean, those friends you need to pull away from. So when you were the life and soul of the party, people won't want to be your friends anymore because they'll see you as boring. Excuse me. And your friends will forever change. And that's one of the difficult things. The relationships, your partner, if you've always drank while you've known your partner, they might not like you sober. They might not like you clean. You will be a completely different person. And that can be really difficult to deal with itself. And touching on what you said earlier, you can't change other people. So loved ones can't help the addict. The addict's got to be ready. They've got to be ready for the change. As difficult as that is, if you've got to step away, just step away. You need your strength for when they're in recovery, and you need your strength to look after yourself. But if somebody else is giving you a behavior such as, why aren't you drinking? You need to be doing this. Um, Why aren't you friends with those people anymore? That is what's going on for them. You can't change them. If they're taking their feelings out on you, that's a big lesson to learn, to be able to just say, I'm not dealing with this. I understand there's something going on for you. I can't deal with it, and step away, because you're buying into their control and their feelings. And you're giving your power away by allowing them to stay in your house when you don't want them to, or for you to go somewhere to have a drink when you're not comfortable stepping in a pub, say, you'd rather go to a cafe. So if you can't deal with the behaviors of other people, that's their issues. Keeping yourself safe is the most important thing.
You raised something interesting that I wanted you to expand on if you can. When you mentioned that there's some people that want those who are going through the addiction to remain in the addiction, right? Like, can you
Oh, yes.
expand on that, please? Because that seems to be very scary for the person who is battling this and maybe trying to overcome it.
Well, it's a way of control. So it can be that, say, a partner who wants you to keep drinking or will encourage you to relapse and just say one will be fine, I'm here to look after you. It's usually because their role is to look after you and they get their self-worth from looking after you. If you get sober, you're going to begin to have your own feelings, emotions, and independence back. So that's going to be a big fear for the partner, that their role will to look after you won't be there anymore. They're going to be abandoned and brushed to the side because you've got your independence back and strength. So there's a lot of benefits to keeping somebody in addiction. Um, they might be a jealous person. So while you're looking ill, and they can say, well, you need looking after. I'm going to come with you everywhere because you're not, like, you could be ill. I want to be there to protect you. It's their insecurities, and they're masking that as, I'm here to protect you and look after you. You can't do this without me, sort of a gaslighting. So it's something to really be aware of, because it has happened in many situations before. And the amount of people I've heard saying they're just doing it because they care. It's not. It's because you're getting your independence back and being your own person.
Could that also mean that there are those who will look for those who are prone to becoming addicted, encourage the addiction, and then have them become reliant on them in a way to manipulate them?
Yeah, into different behaviors. Um, it can go really dark. It can be to for the sex trade. It can be just because they want somebody in their control, because they want somebody to specifically do something. It's Be very, very aware of who, because I did this. My first marriage was absolutely wonderful. It was a great marriage, but I wasn't happy because I enjoyed chaos. My head wasn't straight. I wanted all the chaos. And so I got divorced, and then I went from bad relationship to bad relationship. And I didn't understand why, but I was the caretaker for all those people. Although I was being abused in the relationship, they were also in addiction, and I was there for them. One guy had really bad epilepsy. So I was always with him, making sure he didn't have a fit and land on his head. Um, I cared for these other people. And although it's slightly different from what I just said, but we were both in addiction, whatever relationship it was, I was the caretaker and that was my purpose. So I loved that chaos. It kept me busy. I felt I was carrying out my role. Whereas now I'm still a caretaker. I've got a lot better. But when you care for somebody, you're taking their power away and they become codependent on you. And that's not what a relationship is. You should both have your own power and independence. And that's what a relationship is.
I'm glad you explained that because it reminded me of a situation where there was a few friends who all became single around within the same year. And each of them had difficulty maintaining healthy relationships. And eventually it was discovered that it was more so them than their partners. But they were united in the unhealthiness of their past relationships. And what would happen is that when one person would get a relationship that was going well, they were kind of teased and made fun of to the point where one person, a few of them who actually ended up in relationships, they chose the peer group over their partner, even though the partner didn't necessarily do anything wrong. They just questioned what was going on here and why there's time being dedicated to this group when it could be allocated to him and to her and vice versa. And when you mentioned that, I wonder the people who need someone to be dependent on them, are they then addicted to always having someone there through the codependency because they know, or maybe they even feel that they're not good enough to have healthy relationships?
Absolutely. And there can be a big element of self-sabotage as well, of I'm not deserving. So when things do start to go well, people will do things either if they're in recovery, they might have a drink, even though that's not their plan to get back into addiction, but they know it will ruin the relationship. It can be very much you can push people. So in the end, they'll you can say, I told you so. I knew you would hurt me. Because if you're used to that, either abandonment, hurt, you're going to push people away by acting the same each time. So doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So when things, instead of having a normal relationship and things go up and down, and as we know, every day's different, life happens. But if things are going so well, there's going to be that fear they're going to dump me. They might be having an affair. This isn't going to last. Something's going to go horribly wrong. So you'll self-sabotage before they can do that behavior to you, before they can cheat, before they can dump you, before. So you remain with that power and control that you're feeling and that you won't get hurt. So that can be a really big thing for people as well. And again, it's about stopping, and trust is huge. And that can only be learned with a lot of practice and a lot of learning of what your issue is. Is it abandonment? Is it not being loved? Is it people have had affairs on you before? Again, looking at that and seeing what the self-sabotage behavior might be.
Could that be trust of oneself, trust of others, or identifying that they have trust of the wrong people?
With the groups that you've mentioned, I think going back to that, I think a really, really good thing and a simple thing to do, whether we think it's okay or we've got some idea that it could be a dangerous group for us because we could relapse, because we could get into bad behavior, is writing a list of what is good and what is bad about being within that group and weighing it up and really being honest and looking at it. You don't have to share it with people, but to make it make sense in your head and doing that with relationships as well. Is it the trust? What is your fear? What is good about the relationship? What's your fear? What's the negatives? And really weigh them up. And those lists will help you see where you're finding difficulty. Because you might not put, I don't trust this person, but you could put, they're going to talk about me to their friends. Well, that's a trust issue. They, you could put, they'll spend more time with their children rather than me if they've got kids. So that's an abandonment issue. So writing these things down that you fear and what is good is going to give you a good idea of what you've got to work on and where that relationship can take you. Because if your list is this long of what's bad about the relationship, then the relationship's not worth it. But if the list is this long of just your fears, that's a lot that you've got to work on. I hope that makes a bit of sense.
It does, because then it leads me to, like, if I were to use that in my own life, I wonder how many people who would do that list. And when it comes to the things that are bad, it's behavior based. And then when it comes to things that are potentially good, it's things that you can't necessarily qualify. Let's say, for example, I've known them for 5 years. Okay, was it a good 5 years, a bad 5 years, somewhere in the middle? Like, I wonder how many people will list things that aren't necessarily a reflection on the person or the people, but more so on the length of the relationship. So, for example, you could have someone that says, okay, she is not present with her children. He is cheating on his partner. They're verbally abusive. So these are behavior based. And then you
Yeah.
have someone, well, I know their children. I know their partner. I've known them for 5 years. I've known them for 10 years. So you see the difference. One is behavior and one is more so you evaluating the overall relationship. How can someone narrow it down to the person specifically and their behaviors and don't get caught up in maybe the nostalgia or the length of the relationship itself?
Quite funny if what is it about your partner? If you say that to somebody, why do you want to be with them? And they just reply, because I love them. Right, okay. What do you love about them? I don't know. Say their dress sense. Well, what do you love about their dress sense? It's like with my husband, what I love about him is he can act like a child, a real child. But what I love about that is he brings the child out of me, where I've always been such a serious person. I was always the mummy, the caretaker. The, the thing that drives me mad about him is being childlike. But what I love about him is he brings that out of me. And that's a big, big asset for me to stop me being so serious all the time. So it's really drilling down. So I love their smile. What is it about their smile? Look at the little details. Oh, I like the um what they call like little dimples when they smile, go really into the fine detail. And with the behaviors, if there's things you really don't like my husband says I'm really messy, and I am. I'm terrible. I know where everything is, but I'm so messy. So, why are they messy? Is it because they're a slob? Is it because they're ADHD? Is it because they don't value their possessions? Is it the way that they were brought up? Really get into why, not just they're good looking, they're polite, they're really drilled down on as far down. as it is. So each answer, I like their clothes. What clothes? Their shirts. Why do you like their shirts? I love the colors. What colors do you love? And really go down. And you'll start to find a pattern of what you love and what you don't like. And it could be all the things you don't like my husband hates me being so messy. It's because he's OCD. So that's not the perfect combination, but we make it work. So
Do you think maybe digging that deep will scare some people into not wanting to know what the answers are?
yeah, reality can be really scary, especially when you know that the relationship might not be what that it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be in a relationship. And if you actually look at it, it confirms what you have been thinking, because then you've got to deal with it. So you've got to deal with difficult conversations, emotions. That can be really difficult. But then you've got to look at, are you happy living the way that you're living? Or do you want to start again? Because some people are afraid of being alone. They have a fear that if they're alone, that they can't cope. So the answer isn't to find somebody else before you jump ship. It is being on your own and learning about yourself. So you're not scared to make those difficult choices and that you can make them by yourself.
I think so many people don't find themselves before they find someone else, right?
Yeah. I mean, my mum was a classic. My mum, I think my mum was 21 when my father passed. And from getting with my father, it must have been about 6 months between him passing and her getting with my stepdad. And she's had numerous relationships. And she'd never spent a day on her own, apart from that short break between my father passing and my stepdad. She never spent one day on her own. And she had one, two, three, four marriages, and not one day to deal with her own emotions or what she was going through. So she was, the talk that I did was on ACEs and how I said how my mum died of trauma and ACEs and not of liver cancer because she had so much trauma that she never addressed. And as I said, if you look into ACEs, that she did, she died of trauma and not working on herself.
I know a few people like that, and I've pointed it out to others because what they've done is they've insulated themselves with people who quote unquote are empathic or people who always look to fix others. And what these people have done is that they don't realize it because they're in a way addicted to that type of person because they always want to be needed. And one way to be needed is, okay, you know what? I'm going to go fix this phone. I'm going to go fix this toilet. I'm going to go fix this person. I always need to fix something because if I'm not fixing someone or something, I feel useless. I feel worthless. So I think sometimes people who are addicted to always wanting someone to try to fix them and people who are addicted to always wanting to fix someone, when they get together, they insulate each other and then no one else can come in. And unfortunately, they can't ever have healthy relationships as a result because they're always in a victim and fixer mentality. And when someone strolls in who's healthy, who doesn't have this type of addiction, they're like, oh my God, you're not like us.
Mm.
And it gets scary because there's some people, I believe this, that they enter your life as a mirror and they show you who you really are underneath the mask, underneath the makeup, underneath the fancy clothes, underneath the nice watch, everything. And when you look at this person now and you see what you've always been hiding, you want to get rid of them because God forbid they show everyone else your secret. Would you
Yeah,
agree with that?
absolutely. And have a look at your best friend or your close friends. Are they the people that will say, "Oh, Emma, you're right. He shouldn't have done that," or "He was out of order. Yeah, don't go into work today. Stay in bed." Or is it a sort of friend that will go, "Emma, sort your life out. You're being dramatic. Think about what you're doing." What are your friend groups like? Because as you said, we can seek out people so easily that will reaffirm everything that we want them to, but we're not learning or growing. We're just hiding still. But to have somebody, it's an amazing friend when they can turn around and say, no, you're out of order or you're being stupid. That's somebody who's got an interest for you. If they're just going along with everything, they're just winding you up in your own head, in your own behaviors, and keeping you stuck in this one place instead of you being realistic and looking at reality. So having a friend that will say, "What's the pros? What's the cons?" is going to get you a lot further than, "Yeah, you're right." If you're always right and everybody else is wrong, if your friends are saying that, it's not, they're probably not giving you the best advice. But it can be hard to listen to. When somebody says you're out of order, our natural reaction is to retaliate. But if we stop and listen to what they say, we can learn so, so much. And that is what we have to do in recovery is look at our behaviors. If I snap at somebody, it's not because they've done something, it's because I'm in a bad place. So I need to look at what mood am I in? Why am I in that mood? Can I snap myself out of that mood? And how can I go forwards, not displaying those behaviors and apologize to the other person? And that is what we're taught in recovery. And that is a good way to live for everyone.
The things that we justify, the behaviors we try to get away with through that justification is I always found it to be absolutely insane in a lot of examples, right? Like I'll give you an example. There's someone I know and she was telling me about this person and this person is abusive and cheats on their partner, on their spouse. And I was talking to him, I was like, why do you hang around with people like that? Because it's a reflection on the type of people you pick to be around. And they're like, oh, they're a good person. I was like, a good person who abuses and cheats on their spouse. So I was like, okay, if they truly are a good person, I asked them, I was like, you have a daughter, right? And they're like, yeah. I was like, okay, perfect. So now let's set your daughter up with someone that's going to abuse and cheat on her. Say, so, no, I wouldn't do that. I was like, why? They're a good person, right? If you're going to say that this type of behavior is a good person, then let's put it as close to home as possible, right? And I think
Absolutely.
right, and I think that's where there's like a disconnect when you're trying to speak to people who's going through things like this, especially in recovery, is that sometimes when they get when they begin to identify that the people around them aren't going to help them with the recovery, sometimes they will try to justify the behaviors of their friends of the past, even though in their mind, their new mind, their mind in recovery, they're like, yeah, I think these people played a part in my struggles. Do you find that difficult for people to stop justifying the behaviors of bad people as they're trying to move forward in their life and distance themselves from behaviors that have put them into the battle with addiction?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, because it's safe. We can say, well, they had my back. Um, Again, part of that control thing. Oh, they bought me alcohol when I needed it. They did that for a reason because they wanted something from you. And we're crazy humans, all of us. We can justify absolutely anything. We can make any excuses for anyone, especially ourselves. And the best thing that we can do is just question ourselves, question everything, even if it's your mum, even if it's the cat. Question why they're doing things. You don't have to do it to them, but just get it in your head and work it out. Like, oh, they did this and they've done this again. Why are they doing it? Oh, last time they wanted a lift to the train station. This time they wanted a lift to the shops. So learn people's behavior and why they're doing things. Oh, they bought me alcohol. Why? They didn't ask for anything. Oh, yeah. A week later, they wanted alcohol from me. Look back and really question everything. It's not always going to be negative, but just question it. See what you come up with. Try not to make it up because we can do that as well.
Come on, Emma. We don't like you when you're sober. You're not cool. You're not fun.
Exactly. I need to drink because then more people will like me. And yeah, my biggest fear when I got sober was going on holiday. And that's crazy. I wasn't worried about relapsing because of a family member dying or being in a car accident or something and being in pain. My fear was going on holiday because I thought, how do you enjoy an all-inclusive holiday without a drink? That's how crazy the mind is. So I can cope with everything, but I can't cope on going on an all-inclusive holiday because can I dance and be myself on holiday and have fun? Yeah, I had a great time. But that was my biggest fear. So I needed to look why that gave me fear. And it was about how people viewed me. But now I can dance and have fun without alcohol.
I have a former friend who alcohol was his addiction. And there was times where this is back when I used to go to the bars and the clubs, and we would find him, let's say before last call, it's like 1 a.m., before 2 a.m. And there's times where we'd be heading out and we'd find him passed out in the bushes with cans of beer around him. So he actually left the club with the beer in his hand. That's how heavy he's been drinking. And he's had car crashes because of it. And he was the type of person that he would try to guilt you into giving him a ride just so he could drink, because he knows that if he was to drink, or sorry, if he wasn't able to drink, he wouldn't have a good time. And there's times where he showed up and he had to drive himself, he wasn't able to drink, and he went out of his way to make the night miserable for everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been there. I've done that. And I didn't know why at the time. I had no idea why. And that it was how strong it was and how much I needed a drink. And that is, as we sort of said before, that's behaviors we can see on the outside. And as the person who wants the drink, you're aware you feel grieved. You feel like you've been hard done by, but you're not 100% sure why. You just feel like all your friends are against you and they've done something wrong, and that everybody on the outside can see it.
So Emma, as we close, what advice do you want to give to those who are struggling with their addiction, but they made the decision that they want to get clean, they want to move forward, and they want to live the life that they think is more beneficial to them?
They say in um I'm not a massive fan of AA. It has its place and I think it can really, really help people. But they say in AA that you can live your life beyond your wildest dreams when you're sober. Now, that doesn't include having a yacht and a Porsche and a mansion. It sounds like it. They sort of put it across that way, but it just means you can think and look after yourself and you can be there for other people without wanting something in return. You can start living your life and making your own choices, and you don't have choices when you're in addiction. You don't have that independence and that freedom. And the biggest thing to overcome is the denial and just speaking to somebody. Speak to somebody who's impartial. Don't go to that friend that's going to say, no, you're all right, just have a couple less. Don't go to that person that's going to say, just do it at the weekends. Like you can be blotto all weekend, just don't do it during the week, then you'll be all right. You know, speak to somebody who's not going to give you any rubbish and just tell you it black and white. It can be so difficult to hear. But if you can't speak to somebody like that, speak to somebody completely impartial and just reach out and say, I'm struggling. Or can you tell me your story? And you don't have to talk, just listen to their story, see if you identify with a bit of it, and just say, I can relate to some of that. You know, that small step of just saying, can I chat or can I hear your story? That's a massive step for somebody who's been in denial for so long. And as you build trust, you'll be able to share more and start seeing the world and yourself for who it really is and start finding your true purpose rather than running after something that's not going to fix you. And it's not going to keep you hidden forever. The only way is passing away. If you keep doing that behavior, sadly, it ends in death. So if you want to get out of that addiction, if you want to give up that substance, talking and starting to feel your emotions and where it all comes from, reach out. It's the first massive step.